Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. My name's Jeffrey and I will be your host. We're doing the second part to our Historic Sites and Museums podcast. And of course, with me for the second time is my colleague Ingrid. How's it going?
Hi, it's going well. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Quarantine life is the best.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're able to connect in this way and sort of share our knowledge and our hobbies with the public.
It takes a little bit extra effort to try and do podcasts with guests from home, but thank you, Zoom, and all of your users, because this is how we roll.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone listening in during quarantine as well.
They have nothing else to really do, right?
I
And
know they
only
just have a lot of fun listening to us be dorks.
exactly.
Okay.
All right. So last time we talked about the definitions between a historic site and museum. We went into some major differences and some institutions that could claim either one. Then we went into how culture played into getting a site registered. And then we kind of wrapped up with examples of historic sites and some museums as well. And then, we did talk about some objects or artifacts that would draw you to a museum. So first off, we're going to start by talking about some non-traditional historic sites and museums. Two that I think of right away are national parks and aquariums. National parks have a lot of actually historical value just by nature, but there's also usually some extra historic sites or museums within most national parks. I always think about the Smoky Mountains where they have a lot of early settler cabins and landmarks and mining. So that's one reason why some of those places get extra fundings because they have museums and historic sites within it. And then not many people think about an aquarium being a museum, but they are considered museums as well because they are curating fish and different fish life and marine life. So they do qualify as a museum. Can you think of any other non-traditional places, Ingrid?
Yeah, actually, I will admit aquariums was not one I realized right away until you had mentioned it, which I think is super neat. To add to your point, I think other important buildings, such as churches, and another non-traditional I'd give is planetariums as well. While a lot of people might not necessarily tie, science and history together, a good example is the Adler Planetarium in Chicagoland, actually. As you mentioned, aquariums curating and logging fish. The Adler, for example, has a very solid collection of scientific instruments like globes and telescopes that are, old or valuable. And they can basically share how, these tools of science have evolved and developed over time and how we use them today. Additionally, some other important buildings, as I mentioned, churches might have a famous architect or, artists that have contributed to the work, as well as may have, had a famous visitor at one point come and visit. So, that's some other
Yeah.
ones. One that I think is going to show my really weird side and not to be creepy, but tombs are a good one. So a really famous one in Illinois, if you're local, is Lincoln's Tomb in Springfield.
Yeah, definitely. Cemeteries are a big draw for some folks, not just for genealogy, but to see historic figures. I always think about Arlington Cemetery because people go and see the fallen heroes that have died in the battle. Here down in the St. Louis region, we do have Jefferson Barracks where they do have a museum and a historic site in the barracks as well. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was like, actually, that's a really great observation. Actually mentioning Arlington, made me think of besides, the actual grave sites, monuments or museums, right? So Arlington has its fair share of famous statues that people would want to go see. So, there's monuments like Washington Monument in DC. A local one, Chicagoland, is the Haymarket Martyrs Monument, which is in Forest Park, which is just south of where Jeff and I went to school. So yeah, I didn't even think of those as well.
Yeah, I honestly just thought about a second one over in St. Louis that they just got dedicated a few years back, and that was the Dred Scott Case Monument. So they just finished this monument for Dred Scott outside of the courthouse, and they had a whole dedication ceremony where one of his descendants actually spoke at the unveiling. So I just thought about that as well, because not just a block further was where they used to have their slave market too. So just the whole area could be a whole historic monument to itself.
Oh, that's so incredible. That's amazing.
And another one that I kind of thought of was the Heidelberg project. If people aren't familiar with this, it's just a big kind of a block or a two down in Detroit suburb, and they just have a collection of art that people have done, and it's just displayed throughout the whole street block. And you don't have to pay to get it. You can go donate some money, but it's just in a random neighborhood that if you really don't know it's there, you would probably miss it. And that's just some other random things that people probably don't think about that needs curated.
Yeah, that was a really good example of a very non-traditional one because it's kind of open to the public in an open forum or space, and it's such a collection, like a random collection. It almost feels like, but yeah, that's a great
Yeah,
example.
and it definitely brings pride to their rural place, because it's in a kind of a poorer neighborhood, so they actually have something to look forward to, and the people really value all of those art pieces there. Definitely,
Yeah, and I
definitely
think
helps.
one thing sometimes that may feel lost is just being in Chicagoland too, where there's quite a discrepancy between classes and neighborhoods. Is making these sort of historic sites and museums accessible to the larger public, and sort of making it relatable. Because I think sometimes, kind of like with academia, we sort of think that due to admission prices or maybe just not actually asking the public what they would like to see
Yeah,
in institutions, sometimes I think that museums or historic sites, while the people invested in them are very invested, sometimes it doesn't necessarily carry over to the public. And we might be in our ivory tower, so sort of right, asking people what they want to see and helping them invest in their own um, collections basically is a really cool thing to do.
and that's a really good segue into our next question: is how to draw an audience to a museum or site. So, do you have any
Yeah.
other further thought on that topic?
Yeah, besides directly asking the public, that was actually one thing in grad school that they really push for in public history, is actually asking the public, even though it seems a little bit odd or peculiar or maybe uncomfortable to do so. I do think, as I said, community outreach is absolutely crucial. I do think something that supplements or encourages or helps is creating a strong online presence as well, just for survival and vitality. It's really important to foster relations within the community, as I had mentioned, and it certainly doesn't help to directly contact organizations in the community that might align with or benefit from your institution's mission or collections. A big one, for example, for a lot of probably historic sites that we've mentioned, like Lincoln's Home, or museums are educational ones like schools, right? Usually these historic sites and museums are already, educational tools and resources that can help people of any age learn more. It doesn't even have to be children. Oftentimes these have events to sort of foster, engage lifelong learning, right? Additionally, appealing websites or engaging social media posts can also attract followers and spread information about your site and what resources and events you have to offer to the public. Just out of curiosity, what does the Stephenson House do to reach out to its community?
Yeah, so since it's before I was there, they began reaching out just as a restoration project. They
Mhm.
kind of got the community donors into just investing their own time and effort into just restoring the historic house.
Mhm.
Once the house was actually built, then you have to actually start, trying to furnish the house with what they actually want to see. It's kind of weird to have like their projects done, but it's always never done, because it's, especially with an old home, you always have to keep on drawing the audience back with new things. So we have new exhibits, new events. When I started, I had tried to do more free events where they don't actually have to go through the historic house. They're just on the site property itself. So my first year that I started working there, we did like an Easter egg hunt, and that
Mhm.
wasn't to draw anyone to the house specifically, like take a tour is just more of like an awareness type thing where at least
Hmm.
now you actually know where we are. And from that, we actually did get more tourists coming through later on after that Easter egg hunt because they actually knew where we were. So, just trying to couple what the people at hunt versus what you.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know you had mentioned like the Easter egg hunt. You might not think, early 1800s in Illinois. Um, but one museum that was like a train museum I had read somewhere basically did the Polar Express around Christmas, which I also think is a neat coupling as well. It's a
Definitely.
good, I guess, idea. There's like a historic home in a historic depot area, do something like that. So, yeah, as we had mentioned, sort of aligning with your community and other organizations, you can all help each other out in the long run.
Going along that same lines, how does social media impact museums and other sites?
Oh my gosh, social media is huge, and I personally probably spend way too much time on social media, following some of these institutions and laughing at them. But it's a great tool, as I mentioned, to engage and foster positive relations with your audience, especially connecting with your community, especially during turbulent times like these that we're experiencing with, staying at home due to COVID-19. Most of these institutions are closed to the public due to the pandemic. However, they can still reach their fans via posts to provide an escape sort of from reality or to provide sort of, peace and solace, as well as continuing to educate and remind the public of the important work that they're completing. For example, this podcast, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Definitely podcasting.
I'm definitely not promoting Jeffrey and the Stephenson House right now. I'm not sponsored in any way, but many institutions are demonstrating creativity, I think, by adapting due to these closures. Some are highlighting their collections or making artifacts, images, and collections online or accessible for free. Additionally, some themselves are calling upon the public to take action and share their own experiences, which provides, as you mentioned, kind of like with the Easter egg hunt, a free publicity for these institutions. One example that I particularly think is very cute is the Adler Planetarium, which I mentioned earlier. If you go to their Instagram page, they created a downloadable portable astronaut named Captain Adler that they're inviting the public to take on, quote, adventures and tag them in it. So whether you stay at home or if you go on like a social distance walk and you take a pic and send it to them, they're sharing them. So I think it's really quite brilliant. It's encouraging people to be creative during this time as sort of, a distraction tactic, but also have fun. So
Yeah, I think social media is super huge, even just not in pandemic times, because that's how I reach a lot of my target audience now. Because I usually target mothers and women between the ages of like 25 and 40.
that was so
That's
specific.
yeah,
I'm kidding, I know.
yeah. But those are the people who use social media the most, and so I
Mm-hmm.
always cater my posts to what women would like to see. Like I do appeal to men too, but by my own research, it's mainly women, like probably 80-20 in favor of women who actually see our social media posts. So I always
Mm-hmm.
try and do things that they would like more than men, just because they're on their social platforms often. And we,
Yeah.
we use a lot of more photos, and it just seems like the women grab towards the photos more than just great just talking.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit I'm guilty of that. I'm also the kind of person where if I see a strong social media post, I'll totally share it with other people. So as you mentioned just getting awareness out there, which is really good for the institution as well as the public. So,
So, what are some ways that you've seen other sites use social media really well?
oh yeah, so I'll mention my top three favorite ones. So firstly, the National Park Service on Facebook cracks me up. So on one hand, they showcase the loveliest vistas of the national parks, but oftentimes they're like accompanied by a really funny or witty quote. So I think they do a good job of reaching their audience with relatable references, especially from TV shows or movies. I've seen them quote like SpongeBob before, Parks and Rec, The
Much.
Office. So there are so many good posts that they have. So they usually make me laugh. I'm also on Instagram. So the museum campus here at Chicago has done like a really stellar job at providing adorable and hilarious content, especially during coronavirus. You mentioned the Shed Aquarium earlier, so I don't know if you follow them or not, but they're taking.
Of course I do.
Oh, so okay, you've probably seen it then. I think it's the cutest thing that they're walking their penguins around to go visit some of the other
Yes,
animals.
I've seen it. I love it.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, once again, it's a really funny and like smart way of showcasing all of the diversity of their collections. And then also, like I said, the Field Museum has currently had someone dressed up as a T-Rex. As a nod to Sue, one of the most complete T-Rex. So you just have someone running around in a T-Rex costume demonstrating, quote, social distancing, unquote, just to highlight their dinosaur collection. How about you? Have you seen any solid posts?
I think some of my favorite ones since we've been in quarantine is the zoo. I've seen so many zoos, as you mentioned, like take their animals actually out walking. St. Louis Zoo here took out one of the leopards the other day, and they were actually being able to walk amongst African part of the zoo. And then, of course, our zoo does take its penguins on walks too. So it's just nice that the animals actually get to breathe just a little bit, not just being in their exhibit the entire time. Maybe it was last year or the year before, the Missouri History Museum, when it was the anniversary of the East St. Louis race riots, they did a Twitter campaign where they tweeted by the hour of like what actually was happening at that time during the riots. They started out with how one of the cars came in and they like were in and inciting riots, and then they would go on to their next tweet and they would just do the digression of the riot in real life time.
That's
they would
really,
show,
really cool.
Yeah, and they show images too. So it was a really fascinating type of Twitter thing. And I find that a lot of museums and historic sites do Twitter very well, and they do Instagram very well. So if you ever need to check out new museums, just search Twitter and you'll find a whole.
Yeah, some other ones I found really funny that might move over to Snapchat as well is a lot of art museums are doing like caption contests, or some research libraries like the Newberry in Chicago.
Yes.
They'll have like an art piece that they'll showcase, and then they'll have a competition for either people to like recreate it on Snapchat or something, or for caption contests, which also cracks me up. But I think it's a good way of, once again, inviting the public to sort of, be creative and contact them about their collections while reminding the public that this is what they do.
True. All right. So it looks like we have about a minute left on our podcast. So this is going to be a very fast speed round. So last time we did 5 museums that you visited. What are 5 that you want to visit? You have about 30 seconds. Go.
Okay, I haven't been to Philadelphia, so I really want to see the Philadelphia Museum of Art to do the Rocky steps. I'm kidding. The Museum of the American Revolution, because of my background, the Rodin Museum, and then Carpenter's Hall. And then I have not been to DC for a while, and I really want to see the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, because it was under construction when I went, and it looks fabulous.
Same here. I've wanted to see that for so long, and I also want to see Mount Vernon and Monticello as well. All right, friends. We are out of time. Thank you very much, Ingrid, for coming on.
Of course.
And you can find this podcast at www.stephensonhouse.org or on YouTube on our channel. We'll see you next time.